Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Victory Monday. We are very excited to have Outkick 360's Jonathan Hutton. Been a big fan for a while. Welcome, Jonathan. Just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, et cetera, et cetera.
Appreciate it, guys. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm glad you didn't say Midday 180 instead of Outkick 360 there, Trey, at the beginning. Some people have slipped up. I have not done that yet when introducing the show, so knock on wood. From McMinnville, Tennessee, and the people of Morrison would want me to say from Morrison, Tennessee, because that's a small town inside of McMinnville, which is also a small town. Grew up on a farm there. My parents inherited a farm whenever I was young, like second grade, and we moved to Morrison and grew up there on the farm ever since. It was awesome. I wish I could go back more often, but I am Middle Tennessee through and through, and love it.
This is so random. Typically, we kind of get into the beef of all your career stuff and continually progress, but you said McMinnville, and I remember one time in third grade, I was a part of like the gifted and talented type, whatever. And we went to McMinnville, and is there like a big mansion there? It was like the McMinnville. We went to a big house, and it was like a murder mystery or something.
Yes, there's like a bed and breakfast there, and I can't remember the name of it. But yes, there is. And I think it still is a bed and breakfast. I think the family still owns it. I think it's on like a haunted tour too. If you take like a Middle Tennessee haunted tour. And my guess is if you were a part of like a talent competition, chances are you won if you went on tour in McMinnville. That's my guess. If it's going to be a humble brag.
Yeah. So you're in McMinnville. You go to Morrison. What was the high school you went to?
Warren County. Everyone thinks I went to McMinn County because of McMinnville, but it's actually in Warren County, and so it's just one high school, Warren County High School. There's a private school, Boyd Christian, that's in town there, but 2000. My graduating class was like 530. I mean, it's a fairly large graduating class, and we had at the time over 2,000 kids went there. So yeah, it was a fairly new high school whenever I went. They were at what is now the middle school, was the old high school there, but there's always just been one main high school where everyone's centrally located. They should be a lot better in athletics, and they're actually a lot better now than when I was in school. I think we won a combined 4 football games on the football team I played for while I was there, and they're much better now. And props to them and the coaches for turning it around, but they're still not top of mind whenever you think of 3A or in that case now I guess they're 5A, 6A football. That's McMinnville's. You're thinking of Oakland and Riverdale, who we had to play every year.
No, yeah, I couldn't even imagine. I graduated with 70 people.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated, pure 1A high school football. But so, did you have any exposure when you were in high school to like maybe knowing you wanted to do media at all?
A little bit. But I mean, I didn't declare my major in college until my junior year. Like I did all of my prereqs and all of the electives. I got those out of the way and just stalled as long as possible on my major. So, I mean, I had a decent idea about radio and media through a guy named Brian Kell, who at the time was the general manager of Hot Country 104 in McMinnville, and then a guy named Jay Walker, which is his legitimate God-given name. It's awesome for radio. He was the morning host on that station, and they had a AM station, WAKI, and they were carrying the Titans radio network whenever the Titans moved to Nashville. They were a part of that founding station group with Larry and Mike whenever they put that together. And of course, I had no idea then, but I would do a couple of things for pregame stuff for basketball, but nothing like I was on air. I more or less just hung out with those guys whenever they do a tailgate outside the gym, but nothing to the point where I thought I would do anything like I'm doing now, because growing up and then once I got to college, everybody really tried to talk me out of it. And like they would anybody in the media, because they say you can't make money in sports journalism or in media coverage, which is just false. You just have to be able to live without it for about a decade right out of college. And a lot of guys and people, women, can't do that. They've got to find an income. And I was lucky enough to find a few hallways and dining rooms to put a bed down early on, right after college, and made it work. You know, that's my story on post graduation. And I didn't even declare until junior year, where I just threw it all in the middle of the table and said, you know what, we're going to try this.
Is there ever a person, because when I think of radio voices in Nashville, just good radio voices, I think of Jonathan Hutton and Buck Rising. I'm serious, like you guys just have like such distinct voices. Was there ever a person that said, you know, Hutton, you got a voice for this?
Not really. I mean, my parents would tell me to speak up whenever they would sing in church. You know, that's about like that's about all they would tell me. Because I would stand over there and not sing during whenever it was time for the hymn or whatever, because it wasn't cool. But no, not really. They I think once I told people what I was doing, it clicked and it made sense, right? But I'm no Buck Rising. Let's put it that way. Where I think the guy was born with it. I don't even remember exactly. I remember having a very soft, like, before puberty, high-pitched voice.
Wow.
And I don't remember exactly when it turned, but it was like late. I think it was like 7th or 8th grade before I actually went through like the deep voice transition. And it was extremely awkward. Like everybody, I think their most awkward age, like if you're walking around Earth, your most awkward age is probably somewhere between 7th and 9th grade, give or take a couple months. Mine lasted from like 7th to sophomore year, where it was just, you know, the worst. But, you know, once you attend your first keg party in high school, junior year, that's all she wrote. You know, here we go. Everything was cool and sledding downhill after that. Meanwhile, Buck was doing that in 3rd grade, probably.
But
so talk a little bit about that. You talked about the hustle period, kind of those years after college. What was that kind of transition from after college, whatever? I don't know what internships you had. What did you have a period before you got to Titans Radio where you were just doing different things, hustling a little bit?
Strictly with Titans Radio. Nice. It's a long story, but I'll try to make it brief as possible. Sure. So junior year, I just declared my major, right? And I'm working at the campus recreation center. I'm a floor supervisor at the time. You know, it's about as high up as you can get. That's a badge of honor for me. And which means I had an office. I was a student worker, but I had an office. And I would close things down at midnight and then on the weekends have a weekend shift. And it was a Saturday, late July. And I randomly saw on, it wasn't Twitter, it may have been MySpace, honestly. Someone posted that Titans Radio had an opening for an internship. And at the time, Larry had about 15 interns, 10 to 15 interns, and they all had something to do on game day during the week. I mean, it was an operation. And I randomly applied because I had just declared that previous semester. And I was in summer school, getting ready to start fall semester, my junior year. And I applied and got it. He called me up. And I think what happened was, and by the way, the story of my career is right place, right time. Like anything you ask me is going to end up going back to that. So I send this email out, and I think I just caught him at the right time where he was in the office or something on a Saturday getting ready for training camp. And he emailed back and said, hey, what year are you in college? All this stuff. Well, I told him, and he goes, can you come in next week? Which would have been the first, either late July, 1st of August. And I said, yes, I'll be there. Had no idea that I had to get course credit for this, right? So I applied through MTSU. I've already got the internship. I applied through MTSU, and Mary Nichols was a professor who was over the internship program, and she denied me. She was like, you can't do it. You don't have enough course credit. Like I didn't have like, news writing 101 or something. I had done all my electives, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. I've got this and I have no idea why she denied me because I've already got the internship, right? And I went and met with her, and she again was just like, we don't make exceptions. This is the only time that I called my dad and had him call in a favor. My dad was the financial aid director at MTSU, which is why I ultimately went there. Going back to high school, I wanted to go to Tennessee, and he convinced me. He set me down at the island in our kitchen, and we had like this little business meeting where he convinced me that if I went to middle, he would stay out of my business. He was not going to check on my grades or my classes. He wasn't going to like look me up and find out what was going on at the, Greek row or whatever. He let me just go about my college experience. And for the most part, he did that. But this is where it came in a massive factor, because he called Sidney McPhee, the president at MTSU, and McPhee overrode Mary Nichols. And so I went in and, she had to sign off on it. She was still a professor, and she had this eye roll, like, don't embarrass us kind of thing. And I still remember, I was like, embarrass you? Like it, So I get to do the Titans radio internship, and I actually didn't have the proper credits to do it. Then it turns out I went 16 years with them. So that was junior year, fall semester, junior year for me was Steve McNair's final season as a Titan and Pac-Man Jones's rookie year. So that was fall of 2005. And up until this year was the first season I did not work with them in some capacity. I worked Nashville Cats football my senior year of college, traveling with Mike, which was really cool. That was the first time he spoke to me, was traveling with the Cats. There's a lot of great stories on those early years, but long story short, I got the internship and just stuck with it because I loved it so much. Mike and Larry, that was Wycheck's first year. He was taking over for Pat Ryan. Brad Willis was in the role that I eventually got whenever he became program director. There's a lot of inner workings where it just worked out for me, where it probably doesn't work out for other people, because I was right place, right time, and I was available. And if had I not been available and I was available, or Mary Nichols would have had her way, I'm not sitting here today for sure, because I'm bouncing around the country trying to make ends meet. My story is a lot different than some of the hardworking people in media that have to move around quite a bit and make it work. I was fortunate enough to be able to just, make ends meet and go about my college days and work on the weekends with them. And then, because I was available, because I worked hard, and I will admit I did that, and I learned everything. I learned how to run the board. I didn't ask to host anything. I went and got practice stuff and brought it back for Mike and Larry, all that. And because of that, because I kept my head down behind the scenes, they hired me on part-time, and I was part-time for like 4 years prior to anything to do with Midday 180. It was cool. And believe it or not, I would go back and do it again. Like, I wish I could go back to 2007 to 2011, because that was a blast, where I had zero responsibilities and I went to any game I wanted to go to in Nashville.
We had Big Joe on a couple episodes ago.
Dubin.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And when we were talking to him about, because he's been in media forever too in Nashville. And one of the big things he iterated when we were talking to him about his media journey is that what got him where he was is that you learn every job that it takes around. So would you say that's a pretty big key to being able to be successful in media, is everything?
Absolutely. And I would say that too. I mean, if you think about what Channel 2 is a great example. By the way, Dubin put me on TV for the first time. It was Dubin and Hope Hines in the same week. And he is salt of the earth. I'll do anything for Joe Dubin and Hope Hines. I would say if you're going to be in front of the camera, you need to learn what goes on behind the camera. Same thing for if you're going to be behind the mic, you need to learn what goes on, behind the studio, because if you can run a board, you can keep a job. Because I was a producer, because I knew how to edit audio, and I could run a board, I could run a Titans game, I could run the Cats game, I could sit in and do a Preds game if I had to. I was never asked to. I made it through that dip in the economy, which was around 2007, 2008, where Citadel Broadcasting, they own the rights to the Zone, and they also owned 103, and they owned the rights, and they paid the Titans the rights to Titans Radio. So we're all in the same building. There was a huge budget cut, and I kept my job because I could do 4 jobs. So, if I'm just randomly hosting a show, I'm expendable. I'm not needed. I would have been on the chopping block, but because I was able to keep my head above water, I was able to stay in that building. And whenever there was an opening, they came down the hallway instead of, looking outside the door. I think that's important. And I would say that look at like Jill Jelnick at Fox 17. I mean, she does literally everything with that sportscast. Not everyone is as fortunate as, and they would say this, as Lehman and Burton at Channel 5, who I get to work with each week. And I love those dudes, but their setup is perfect. I mean, they can go out and shoot and edit a story, but instead of having three anchors and one field producer, their setup is 2 anchors, 2 field producers, and they can do twice as much work and make everything come together perfectly. Whereas, you got budget with Sinclair and Fox, and it's Jill, and it's her. And honestly, there are 75% of media are like her and don't have the setup like Scripps has given Channel 5. I'm pumped that, I get to go to Scripps and do all that, but their setup is immaculate compared to the rest of Nashville media. And it's because they put a lot of money into sports. Most people don't. So if you're going to get into the business, you have to be able to do the technical end. And in my case, I didn't know how to do it. But by the time whoever put me in that chair figured out that I didn't know how to do it, I kind of had faked it until I made it. And I had some guys ahead of me, like Brad and Larry, who taught me the bare bones of it to just get me through. And then once I got in rhythm of it, then they could add more to my plate. So the answer, yes. You got to have some people that are willing to teach you. I think a lot of times there are people who aren't willing to handhold. They just throw you in the fire and say, hey, here's the dump button. Here are the pots. Here, mic 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's your feed from Sat 4 or whatever you're getting your audio from. It's all, it's a different language. And I certainly wasn't doing that in college. I just declared my major the semester prior. So I got a hands-on experience of the internship, and that was the best course I ever took in college. It wasn't out of a textbook. It wasn't at a lecture. It wasn't going to some social club or doing the radio station or TV station. Those things are great, but the best experience I got was an internship. And I would recommend someone doing an internship, 3 or 4 of them in college, if possible, if you know what you're going to do. If you don't, sit back and figure it out by all means. But if you know what you're going to do, I would do the internship every possible moment of the college experience if I could, because a lot of times in our case, we're going to hire 2 a semester. And if you're really good, we're going to try to get you back on for another semester as a paid intern instead of college credit. So my advice would be absolutely do it and then intern in a lot of different areas.
Hey, it's really hard to find some internships sometimes around here.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Well, you know what? A lot of it too. A lot of these guys, there was something happened in the internship program we were wanting to do with Titans and with Midday, where we got some email one day that just said internships have been shut down company wide. And it's because some idiot, I don't know who it wasn't in our building. Some idiot had overworked their intern to the point where they complained and filed a lawsuit. And, they went above those hours that they were allotted for their college credit and then did not get paid past those hours. And one thing leads to another, and, one bad thing shuts it down for everybody. And I think that's the case across the board, where people are scared to employ, guys, girls in college who are not getting paid, but are getting college credit. And then having to keep up with all the hours. There was someone, cracked the whip on that for us. And we've brought it back now with Outkick, luckily. And we're hoping that it sticks on with Fox.
So talk a little bit about the machine that is Titans Radio, because I don't know. I guess talk about who do you think is most responsible for their success? Because even back in the early 2010s, when the team sucked, everything about the team sucked. It seemed like Titans Radio did not. I mean, they've just had it together for a really long time. So just talk about that a little bit.
Well, there's two main people, and you cannot say one without the other. The first is Mike Keith.
Yep.
Mike is the voice of the Titans, but he is the voice of the fan of the Mid-South.
Mhm.
So if you're a fan of the Titans, you either grew up listening to him, which is going to make him sound really old. Well, he may be.
Yeah.
And then, or you grew up with your parents listening to him, right? So it's one of those, one of those two things. But he's exceptional at what he does, and getting a chance to travel and listen to other broadcasts, or the average person can do it now on satellite radio. A lot of these guys are not half as talented as what Mike does, and how Mike goes into a game and calls a game. When I go to a high school game, and I'm not trying to compare myself to Mike, except in this area, I've got a stack of notes, and I've got a chart that's down here where I can flip charts and get to different notes quickly, and I've got a rhythm to it. I've got to have that. I've got to have a cheat sheet in front of me. Mike doesn't. He's got like a couple of stats like around the league, and a NFL schedule on the wall, and a couple of other things, maybe like 10 little tidbits that he may hit if something happens in a game. But for the most part, he just calls it as he sees it. And there is an art to that he has perfected. He's a legend. And I'm glad they put him in not just the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame, but the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame this past year. But before there was Mike, there was Larry Stone. And Larry was, you mentioned 2010, Larry would have been there then. And he put the network together. He put the sound of Titans Radio together, all of the into breaks and the big voice that you would hear, or the theme music, the layout of pregame and postgame, things that are pre-taped that you were live, all of that mixed together was Larry Stone, who is my mentor. I worked with him on a daily basis for about a decade, and he now runs and owns radio stations in Cookeville and Livingston and other places across Tennessee, and is doing great things. And everybody that is now with Titans Radio was in some way connected to Larry or Mike. Brad Willis was the number 2 underneath Larry whenever I started. Rhett Bryan was the spotter for Mike Keith, and had been even prior to me getting there. Mike and Rhett have seen every single Titans game since they moved to town. That's counting all of them. He's seen every single Titans game. And everyone in between. Philip Noel has been there a long time. I think he was interning or part-time when KDF was a rock station, whenever the Titans moved here, and was embedded with Mike and Larry and Brad and Rhett. That is a true team that has been together. And now Rhett is doing Larry's job, and it sounds very good. And Mike is still straight down the line. You can tell he's a Titans fan. He's calling for the Titans fan, but I think he does a great job of keeping the energy to it, no matter who has the football and what's going on in the game. Because there were some lean years that you're referring to after Fisher left and Vince Young was out, until what the situation they have now with Vrabel and Robinson. And Mike did some polishing on those seasons, that's for sure. But he also didn't lie to you as a listener. And I think he treated the listener with respect in regards to all of that. And I think that's key to it. And Titans Radio, I'll say this too. The key to Titans Radio is the Tennessee Titans. And early on, there were no restrictions on how we went about pregame. Great example is Pac-Man. We covered the Pac-Man story in pregame like we were not like we were the Tennessean, because Jim Wyatt and Paul and Beauclair, they had that thing unbelievably well covered. But what I mean is, we didn't hide from the fact that there was a situation going on with Adam Jones out in Vegas, and whether or not he was going to be suspended. Not every team allows you that type of privilege. And it is, if the team owns the radio network, they kind of control it. And at the time, they didn't. Fisher gave us tons of access. So did Floyd Reese. And because they set the tone for the access we wanted to have and how we reported it, that allowed Mike and Larry to build the sound around the theme, which was, we're going to give you the news, notes, and game day information. And if you're a first-time listener, or if you're a long-time Titans caller, you're going to be able to turn on the radio and know the score of the game and what's going on, and the news around it, and why what just happened is important. That all of that factors into the success of Titans radio and the 70 plus stations that now carry the games.
So how long, because I mean, you just talked a lot about Titans radio. So now, I mean, you talked about how long you were there, but how long were you there until you were also got onto 104.5?
So 2005 to 2000. So we started January of 2012 was my first day on air with Midday 180. I was doing a couple, like from 2010 and 11, I did like the Tennessee Tailgate Show with Joey Kent on Saturdays. I would fill in every now and then for Doug Matthews on Forklift Systems Football Saturday or Big Orange Sunday, one or the other, or sometimes both. But for the most part, I didn't do much with the zone unless it was Titans related, where I would come in and do like scoreboards and stuff with Mark Howard and Dyson and Blaine. And yeah, I mean, it was 2012. It was a nice little gap there. And that goes back to me being able to do a couple different things. I was producing, but I was also running the country music radio website, which sucked. I mean, of all the jobs I had, I hated that one the most. But because of all the banner ads and stuff I was in charge of, and those changed constantly. I just, it's a long story there too, but it was just busy work. But those are some of the things I did. And I had to blog about country music. That lasted about a year. And then I got Midday 180 whenever Clay and Brent and Blaine got the afternoon show when George left.
So, I mean, I guess while we're here, I mean, I guess you can talk a little bit about your time on Midday 180.
Loved it. And I still do. I mean, I'm still with those guys. We took over a show that was already working. Let me first say that 3HL, 3 Hour Lunch, was already working, and it was a better overall show than what the afternoon show, quite frankly, had turned into. And there was a lot of, and look, Plaster's show was a ratings powerhouse, but the talk around town was about whether or not Clay Travis was going to say penis for the 157th time when Brett Favre sent the pick to Jen Sturger. Like that, everybody wanted to know about what Clay was going to do next. So, and that is a true story. Clay once tried to say penis as many times as possible on the air because it's a word he could get away with saying, or at least he thought he could. Yeah. So yeah, it was a fun show, and we were following that, and we knew the day part was going to work because they had already established the lunchtime hour. Keep in mind, prior to them doing that lunch show, that was just like Jim Rome or Dan Patrick full. Like there was just a gap from the morning show to 2:00 whenever Darren would take over for the hour prior to Plaster's show. So there was already momentum there. And when we got that show and took off, we were able to form it around whatever we felt like at the time. We tried a lot of different things. And once we got into a rhythm of knowing each other, and, I found out how to poke the bear with Paul a little bit. He and I were already friends, surprisingly, because he wasn't friendly with many people with the Titans over there. But for whatever, with the media, I'm saying, friendly, fine. Yeah, friendly, yes. But like, would he do a show with them? No. And for whatever reason, he and I hit it off. I could jab him, he would jab back. And we were already... We had a good idea about the show we were going to do. We didn't know Chad was going to stick around because he was the producer and booker for the Sports Zone with Plaster and Willie and Darren. And we thought he was going to go to Cromwell and 102.5 whenever George refused to work for Cumulus. And so at the time, the first call that was made was to Joey Kent. And Joey made a ton more money than what radio was going to pay him, still does. He's extremely successful doing medical and pharmaceutical sales. And he was like, look, I'm happy doing Tailgate Show. It's a nice little hobby on the weekend. It keeps me around the team. Thanks, but no thanks. You guys are awesome. I'll come on whenever you call me. Cool. Well, around that time, Chad got with Brad and was like, "Hey, just so you know, I'd like to be, included as part of an option for a show." And whenever Brad came to us, we're like, he's staying, So Paul didn't know him, and I remember they had to go. I forgot where they went. They went to a lunch or went out in the parking lot and chatted or something. And Paul had to realize that Chad was, not he wasn't sitting in taking notes for plaster about what we were doing. I'm joking there, but that was half truth with how we had to learn that Chad was actually wanting to stay with the zone. And once we had a rhythm to the show, we were off to the races. It's really easy. We became friends quickly. We went to a Mumford & Sons concert at the Ryman, and that was like the first night out with Midday 180, and we kind of grew from there. We had a select group of callers who would call in. Steve Ulrey was our producer at the time and did a nice job, and then we got Reed involved with it, and we found out what worked and what didn't. And for the most part, we just stuck to football. I think if radio shows would just stick to football, their ratings would be a lot higher than what they are.
So was there a point when the morning show was Mark, Kevin, and Frank, and then you guys were on midday, and then it was Clay, Brent, and Blaine in the afternoon?
Yes.
That's incredible. How did they let that? Oh, that's such a good lineup.
Yeah, it's a solid lineup. It was fun, and we all had a good time jabbing at each other. I mean, Mark would come in and Mark didn't bring a laptop, so he would just come in with the computer that's embedded in the desk, and he would leave his Twitter account open sometimes. So the inside joke with our show is love, love, love. And that's because that was our tweet from Mark. Anytime he left it open, we would just type in love, love, love and hit send and then log him out. So we never did anything nefarious. We never DM'd anyone. We never slid up in anyone's DMs. But that was our joke to Mark, and our ode to Mark was the love, love, love. And, Wycheck was always cool because we had worked together with Titans. Ingram's one of the nicest guys you can be around. So, yeah, it was a blast. And there was a 2-hour window. So we carried Dan Patrick for 2 hours, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, from like 10 to noon. And then we came on at noon. We were noon to 3 whenever we first started.
Was there ever a point when you guys were there? Because it seems like the natural progression especially towards the end of you guys' tenure at the zone would be to move you guys to the afternoon, and probably before that even. Was that ever talked about?
No.
Really?
It was never brought up. The only thing we did is we moved to a 4th hour, and our day one on the 4th hour was during our contract negotiations. They were always up in January, and they added a 4th hour to it. And I think they moved us to 10. It was 10 to 2, I think was our first time slot when we moved to 4 hours. And forgive me, it all runs together. But our first day doing that was in Providence for the Titans 2019 playoff win against Brady and Belichick, and in Foxborough. And 3HL had to move to 4 hours as well. And that's kind of the lineup you see right now throughout the zone with the different shows, and how they split the day parts up. But no, we were pulling a pretty good number in midday. Sales was happy. We were sold out. We had live reads. Anytime you hear a station doing 2 live reads in the same commercial break, they're sold out. And we were doing that quite often. All of our shows were. So it was fun. There was really no reason to upset the apple cart because the ratings were high, and Brad just kept it going.
So I'm maybe a little confused on this timeline, as in,
yeah.
So I know eventually, you leave the zone, and so what did you leave the zone first, or did the big shakeup happen first?
What big shakeup?
Like with the morning show with like.
So that happened. So that was in August. That was about 6 or 7 months before we left. The big shakeup with the morning show. So that happened August of 2020. And we left January of 2021. So our contract was about to expire, and and all these contracts are the same. You open up, there's like a 3 or 4 month window of negotiations. Then that's just a clause in the contract. So it's not like they weren't approaching us, because they were, for all I know, they were in that window with Wake Up Zone at the time. I had no clue. But yeah, I found out in a phone call literally right before we went on air that day in August. And it just so happened to be the Zone's birthday. It was like the 17th birthday of 104.5 The Zone, since they flipped and went all sports. And yeah, they got rid of them on that day and called us up in the same room I'm sitting in. I got a call at the door saying that they were going to make this move, and we were the next show on. So, I mean, and they didn't say not to talk about it, but they didn't say to do it either. We were absolutely going to talk about it. I mean, so it was odd, and it sucks. I mean, it's not the first time, it won't be the last, where you have shakeups in radio and everyone's caught off guard. It's just business. And that business took place before our business took place.
Yeah, because with that shakeup, mid-80 was untouched. And so,
yeah.
But
they honestly, if they're going to keep us together, they shouldn't have messed with us then anyway, with 6 months left in our contract. Like, if they wanted to mess with our show, the time to do it would have been when our contracts were up, because they can do it, and it would look cleaner. And I'm saying that from a guy who I'm looking at it from the business perspective. If you're going to do a shakeup, you can easily do it and make your move whenever the contracts expire, which is generally how things go down. And they kind of tier it so that all the contracts don't expire. Ours were all in line, but they kind of tier it so all the shows don't expire at the same time, and you can kind of keep everything going.
Yeah, but from what it sounds like is, you really enjoyed your time on midday, and the ratings were, the ratings were great, sales were happy, all that. So did the shakeup play into like part of the reason you guys wanted to leave and do Outkick, or what was the
in fact, like, we were worried that they were going to put us on in mornings. That was our big worry. Now that they could have done. You say they didn't mess with us. They didn't mess with our time slot, and they didn't move the three of us around. We were worried that they were going to put us in mornings, which could have been their prerogative. And thankfully they went with some fill-ins, and then ultimately they got a good guy in Jason to host with Ramon. But we were sweating that more than anything, because at the time we didn't know what we were going to do. We just knew that our contracts were expiring at the end of the year. Nothing had been even discussed to that point. So what we didn't want was to get stuck in mornings and be, have a decent number rating wise, and then be like, hey guys, you're staying in mornings. Yeah. We did not want to get up at 4:30. I don't know how those guys did it, because most games now end at 11. Like the Super Bowl's over at 9, and that's relatively early. But if you go like to the national championship games for college, if you go to, anything to do with the World Series, a lot of these games are going late, and those guys were always on time and ready to go. And not at 6. They went up, they did a show. Kevin had a show at 5. That was like the Zone local update or something that led up to their show at 6. I'm still dumbfounded about how they pulled all that off.
So did Clay come to you guys about Outkick 360 and just kind of talk about how that vision kind of
Clay knew our contracts were going to expire. He didn't know when, because we're just friends with him. And,
right.
We would talk to him like we would talk to anybody. Right. Mm-hmm. And he knew that he had worked for radio. He worked in radio. He knows the contracts were 3 years, generally speaking. Not everybody has a 3-year deal. We did. And he did. And so he was asking when everything timed up, and when he could actually talk with us, let us know. And we did, because we had signed 3 different contracts. And of those, the first contract is just like, here you go. Here's your show. Have at it. Second contract was, we want to keep you guys together. There's a lot of momentum here. You guys are building on something nice. Here's a bump in pay. Have at it. Cool. Third contract, you're kind of looking around going, okay, we've been doing this 6 years. We're established. I think 6 years in, we were the longest running trio in Nashville radio, because I think by that time Wycheck had left, and therefore Blaine was moved to mornings. And I think at that time we were the longest running trio in sports talk, because Plaster was already out at the game. I may be wrong by a year on that, but we're looking at it going, okay, what do we do now? And we didn't have any other place to go. And for the most part, you really don't. You've got to create that. And we didn't have that in our third contract. Fourth contract, Clay had already said, let us know. Let me know. And we did. And the rest is history. We let him know right as it was like December, like a month out. And we told him we could officially talk to him in December. We already had an attorney that was handling everything for us. Shout out Brad Lampley. And from there, day one, the first day that he could speak to us, I think was the day of Toy Field. That night was night number one, and he took us to dinner and gave us a huge sales pitch. And it was the first time we'd ever been pitched. Most of the time we're saying what we want to do. Mm-hmm. Can we have permission to do this? And on his end, it was, here's why I want you. Here's what we're doing. Here's where we're growing. This is the direction I'm headed, and here's my vision. And then we met again like 2 weeks later. And then after that meeting, we said, hey, throw us an offer. And he did. And he did it that first week of January. And we were, it was an offer that we knew we were, number one, we were going to take. And we knew it was an offer that they weren't going to match, which is the best case scenario. I mean, when you've got a situation where you're doubling whatever had been on the paper in front of you the week prior. And that's what Clay did.
Did you guys know that Clay was, could possibly sell Outkick in the future, or his direction at all?
He never lied to us. I asked him at that dinner, there was like six people there. And I said, Clay, are you selling? Because I could tell based on what he was doing and positioning. And he didn't say he was selling, but what he told us was, he answered it by saying, I'm hiring you guys about 6 months too early. I'm hiring you guys 6 months maybe than when I should. And our first day, so we left January 15th on a Friday. And by the end of May, the sale was official with Fox. And it was really done before that. He called me up in early May and told me what was going down. And we kind of knew once we got on board, we knew that the negotiations were going on, and we knew that we had the 30,000 foot view of it, right? Like we knew that there were 3 companies in position to purchase Outkick, and it was a question of whether or not Clay wanted to sell, because he had been approached. We were friends with him. We knew he had been approached previous numerous times about Outkick, and he had always said no. And this time, it was a perfect scenario for him, and he didn't even know he was getting Rush Limbaugh's show at the time. A lot has changed in 2021 going into 2022. But yeah, we had an idea. He never said, hey, it's going to be me and here we go. We knew there was going to be some jet fuel behind what we were doing. And he was hinting at it without directly telling us by saying, I'm hiring you guys 6 months too soon. And that's kind of the way it was. I mean, we didn't start till March, but we didn't really need to start until the end of June, quite frankly. And here we are with Fox, and they've been awesome with us.
Really
take
cool.
us. Oh, go ahead, Kyran. You're good.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, yours is probably more in line. I was going back a little bit, because obviously, a lot of people wouldn't know like kind of the ins and outs of the things we've been talking about with you guys leaving the zone and the shakeup and stuff. So like, no bad blood with the zone, right?
No. Everything that went down, and sorry, I'm texting Chad right now as we speak. He's asking me which color jacket I'm wearing, because we're headed to New York, and he and I tend to dress similar. There was no bad blood. It was business at the end, and business can sometimes, rub people the wrong way. And I think, if you turn the hot water spigot on, let me give you a Coach Mack reference. If you turn the hot water spigot on and it's just blaring out hot water and you leave it on, eventually that hot water is going to cool off a bit. So I don't think there's any hard feelings. I know, the day we left, they wished us well. We did the same. And I saw a couple of guys out at the Super Bowl recently. And, while I haven't seen them in like a year, it's not like you got to avoid anybody involved with that. I think some people are surprised that we still mention the zone and midday, but I mean, that's a part of our history. There's nothing negative in regards to any of that. I mean, everybody's going to have some behind the scenes stories and a tell-all book, but mine aren't going to be all that juicy in regards to 104.5, because again, I loved it. I mean, it was a blast. The show was a blast. Working for Brad, working for Allison, and everybody behind the scenes was awesome.
When did you find out that you were not going to be part of Titans Radio anymore? Did you kind of know that, or how did that work?
I gave everybody with Titans a heads up about the Titans Radio, a heads up about what was coming, because I knew after that second dinner, and the final month of my contract negotiation, I could accept, and the same goes for Paul and Chad, we could accept offers from outside businesses that wanted to hire us, competing or non-competing businesses. And we would let Cumulus know if we received any. And I'm not sure they thought we would. I don't know that, but I'm not sure they knew that or thought that. And we did. And I let everybody know, hey, we're going to be getting an offer. Now, at the time, I didn't have one. I didn't have a second offer from Clay, but I knew we were going to get one. And, I took some advice from some people on how to handle it. I think and at least I tried to handle it all the right way. But they also kind of had a heads up on this may be coming. Now, I'll say by doing that, I realized what was going on, because at the time, Cumulus and the Titans were in negotiations to extend their rights agreement for the Titans Radio Network, which is also, unlike some cases, it's a 10-year deal. In many cases, it's like a 5. And I'm not sure what they just re-up for, but I knew that the deal was up because I was just finishing the season with them, and I knew the deal was up. And so they're negotiating that at the same time they're negotiating with us. And my guess was it was going to end. If I'm leaving them, they may keep me off the air. But I also know and had been told that was not set in stone. Like, let things just, if you handle it the right way, maybe things can work out based on what Titans Radio and the Titans want. So I found out I'd never been given official notice one way or the other until it was early March of last year. And the timing of that just came because we were preparing for the NFL draft, and Mike wanted to know whether or not I should waste my time preparing for the NFL draft. He hadn't been told. So they had a couple of meetings, and I'm not sure what happened there, but turns out I'm not a part of Titans Radio. But honestly, like, that was not just a risk that I took. I kind of knew it was a potential outcome based on the decision I was making. So I wasn't shocked by any means, but disappointed that that was the thing, and still is the aspect of my previous gig that I missed the most, is working with Mike and Mac and Rhett and Brad and Phil and Amy.
Yeah, because there's, there have been rumblings, a little bit of rumblings, some rumors that, that you could be or could have been, like a possible replacement for Mike whenever he decides to hang the mic up. So is that something you would be interested in, or are you worried that like that ship has sailed now?
I don't know where that rumor came from, honestly, except during COVID. I guess I can say this now. Worst case scenario, because we traveled during COVID. We were one of 2 radio networks to travel to every single game in 2020. Worst case scenario, if Mike pops positive or is at the hotel and has, test positive for COVID, I would have had to call the game. So I don't know if anything was being talked about prior to that. but stepping in for Mike, quote unquote, that would have been what would have happened there. And I was never under the impression Mike was going anywhere during any of this. So not once that I think, and if I ever get the opportunity, I hope it's years from now, decades from now, because that dude, I hope he does it from start until he wants to finish, and he deserves that. He's going on 23 or 24 years now, and he's better than ever. So no, there's no replacing Mike.
No, there is no replacing Mike. That's a given. But that's still, if one day Mike won't be the voice of he'll always be the voice of the Titans.
Oh,
but
yeah.
You know what I mean. Would that still be something, like, if you got that opportunity to do it after Mike, would you think that's like awesome? Would you do it?
I mean, it would be a blast.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, you can tell by Mike's gig and what he sounds like on a weekly basis. He loves it. And based on that, I mean, here's how I would answer that. Would I love doing play-by-play in the NFL? Hell yes. Would I give up that gig? Hell no. And Mike won't be doing that anytime soon either, is my guess. And there are many gigs in media. 32 of them happen to be play-by-play voices in the NFL, and Nashville's got the best with him. I don't see anyone replacing him anytime soon.
I don't want to hit the rumor mill too much, but I'll ask one more.
Go ahead.
You always hear rumblings. I don't know if they come out of Knoxville or where they come from about him going to Tennessee. How much does he love Tennessee, and what is that? Is there anything to that?
He loves it. He loves them. He loves. I mean, that's a part of his fabric. I'm guessing here. Like I think there was a point in time where there was a chance he could have envisioned himself doing it. Maybe he could see himself doing it down the road. I thought whenever Fulmer came back and became AD, I thought it would have been a no-brainer. If anything came open with the Vol Network, that Mike's on the top of the list. Like if I'm spitballing here and Kessling's not doing the play-by-play, right? Let's say Kessling decides he's off and he's doing something else. I think the dream scenario for Tennessee is Mike and Charles Davis on play-by-play in color. Like, I think that would crush.
Yeah.
It would be outstanding. I also don't know exactly what Charles is up to right now, other than his CBS gig, and he's the voice of Madden and a few other things. So he's got some things worked out for him as well. But Mike's a given for that gig, just like he's a given to double his salary with the Titans if anything like that came up. That's not me churning the rumor mill either. It's a no-brainer and it's worth discussing. Yeah. But I think it's one of those fantasy booking things if we're in WWE more than anything.
So I've got one more for you, Hutton, and then we'll get you out of here.
No rush.
Talk about you guys' creative control at Outkick, and was that part of Clay's pitch to you guys?
So the only thing that he has told us that we could not do is, and honestly, it's very easy not to do it because I hope it doesn't happen anytime soon again. He was irritated that there were so many people in sports media that get paid to cover sports that were advocating not to play sports during a pandemic. And he was like, based on, what I'm saying and what I'm doing, the one thing you can't do is go on anything Outkick and say that sports shouldn't be played during a pandemic, because there are ways to get it done and do it safely. It's just about spending money and making it happen, creating a bubble if you have to. And if you don't have to, more power to you. Fine, done. We were already saying that anyway. Like we were advocating for Major League Baseball to get their act together and come up with something. We were 100% behind what the NFL did, what the SEC was doing, and what the Big Ten failed to do out of the gate. So all of that played into what we were talking about anyway. Creative control. I mean, we own our IP, where you're not doing that in sports talk radio. Our intellectual property is ours. I can't go take the Lene Kakua Country Game of the Week and take like old files of that and play it on Outkick. But moving forward, I can take whatever we're doing and play it on any future show. It's similar to what Stern filed his lawsuit over whenever he left K-Rock and, moved on, and then eventually went to Sirius and they bought the entire library. Again, there I go comparing ourselves to the greatest, but I'm not trying to. It's just that small bit. And I'm trying to, dumb it down for people. It's very simple. As long as our show's good, he doesn't care. And that's what he told us. But we were asking him what he wanted us to do and if we wanted more of a national feel. And I think, our pitch to him, he was pitching us, my pitch to radio stations, Chad and Paul are on board with this too. You can wake up in New York or Birmingham or Minneapolis or New Orleans or Austin or LA. And if you turn on national sports talk radio, no matter where you are, 9 times out of 10, they're going to lead with something coastal. That's either, Knicks are terrible. What's Kyrie Irving up to? What's LeBron doing? That's East Coast, West Coast, doesn't matter. And beyond that, you're probably getting some Dodgers and Yankees and some other discussion. With our show, we're going to talk SEC football because the SEC brand is coastal. And Clay proved this with his Fox Sports morning show on Fox Sports Radio. He could wake up, go upstairs in his Game of Thrones mansion and flip on, Fox Sports Radio, go live and talk Alabama Crimson Tide football in Los Angeles and get phone calls. That's the model. We're playing the hits. To me, I'm no different in my approach to the show than a top 40 radio station that's going to play Taylor Swift on the hour, every hour, because she has the new album drop and it's the hottest hit that people want to listen to. And for us, it's football. It's NFL, college. And then from there, luckily for us, the Titans were relevant. We could work that into the national storyline. Same thing with the Vols and the SEC. We could all tie that into Southeastern Conference play. And then from there, we're also going to play the hits nationally with what matters. And as long as we're topical and we're driving content for the site, he's cool with it. Not one time he said, hey guys, do this, do that. And we're going on a full year with him now.
All right. So I do have a last question. And I kind of just want to ask this because I think it'll be funny. So, obviously on Outkick, even and on Midday too, you've worked close with Paul.
Yeah.
Obviously. And, especially if you're active on Titans Twitter, Paul is very polarizing within the Titans Twitter sphere. So I'm just wanting to ask, as somebody who's like a friend with them and you work close with them, do you think that some of the flack he gets on Twitter is warranted when he goes to war with Titans Twitter, or do you think what's your opinion on all that?
I mean, I warranted or not warranted, it's hilarious to me. So because it gets to him. He tries to ignore it and he can't, and it doesn't matter the scenario. He could tweet out that Rashard Matthews is for the boys after he quit on the team, which I agree with. That dude straight up quit. And he had people in the locker room backing him and fans backing him, which is, funny. But I know that people are going to reply with that and rip Paul for being Mr. Negative. And he's going to play right back into it. That is 100% him. And honestly, the version that you're referring to is softer than the version that I knew from like 2005 to 2014. I don't know what era we're going to end it at, but he would admit that he softened the blow, so to speak, in recent years, I think too. I don't know why that is, but he does it, whenever the wake up zone would come in, they play that, the hurricane. I'm trying to think of the wrestler, the theme music they would play. There's a hurricane coming in and he would come in fired up, ready to go. And, we would refer to that as pissed off for greatness. And every now and then he'd still bring that to the show, but it's not nearly at the same repetitive form that he was in. So for those of you that think he's actually really negative now, you should have seen the guy that covered the team when he had all access. I wish they would open up and give him all the media access again, because that produced some of the best content and the back and forth in that locker room. It was excellent. And it lit a fire under him. I think once we get the phone calls rolling again on the show, we'll get some of that back. But yeah, I mean, I enjoy it. I get a kick out of it. I don't know if it's warranted or not, but either way, I'm here for it, because I like watching him. I like watching him go at it with people.
And do you want to plug Outkick 360?
Yeah, I mean, if you've watched it at this point, you know Outkick 360. And if you didn't know when you started and you're still watching, you've Googled it or you've looked us up on social media. It's easy to find. Search us out, Outkick 360, 3 to 6 Eastern, 2 to 5 Central. People ask us if we're on the radio. We are on the radio. If you go to the bio, there's a link in our bio. You can click that. You can stream us live, and you can find us on literally any platform or anywhere you download your podcasts. And hit me up. If you enjoyed this, hit me up at Hutton Outkick. And swing by. The one plug I'll say, if you're in town watching this, swing by and check out our studios at 6th and Peabody, which we have built out. Part of the Outkick headquarters is in a skyrise downtown in the Bank of America building. But our headquarters, our studio, our daily studio that we've built is right there at 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. They've been great. It's an unbelievable space. And if you haven't tailgated there, if you haven't pregame or postgame there, swing by and do it on a day when we're on the air leading into happy hour.
I've seen the pictures on social media. I haven't been, but it looks
pretty
sweet.
You guys gotta get out there.
Yeah, we will.
Let us know. Let us know ahead of time. We'll get you a moonshine tasting rocked and ready for you.
Nice.
There we go. I appreciate it. This has been another episode of Victory Monday with Outkick 360's Jonathan Hutton. You guys like, subscribe, rate 5 stars, all the things. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next Monday.